traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. This week we have the wars in Ukraine and Israel continuing. We have some pause about people taking blood from people that received the thing in your arm. And we have much more news in regards to crazy weather and record highs in stocks. Let's go ahead and start it. Biggest news of the week was Nvidia. If you guys haven't been paying attention to the news, they've just been on an absolute tear. Now that the whole world is interested in getting all these AI development and chips and programs and software, Nvidia specifically has the kind of chips that the world needs for the AI systems. So everybody is literally buying these chips from Nvidia. They control about 80% of the high-end AI chip market. And they now have become the third most valuable company in the United States and the most traded stock. They overtook Tesla now. Tesla has gone down about 20% in 2024 with the tepid demand for the electric vehicles, but they shattered earnings. They're doing really well. And they're probably going to continue doing really well because the AI boom is just starting. The minutes from the Fed, which is the central bank in the United States, indicates that the central bank is not going to rush to cut rates. So it looks like they're going to probably leave rates higher for longer, which means that that's not good for the overall economy or you and I, because our costs are continuing to go up or stay up due to the fact that it's a lot more expensive to buy houses and buy cars. And that obviously with lower rates gets the economy moving. Stocks in the United States, all positive. The Dow hit the 14th record high for the year. S&P 500 as well hit a record high. NASDAQ was positive, but didn't hit a record high. In Canada, the Communist Republic of Canada, they went up by 0.89%. Average U.S. household spending, monthly spending, compared to 3 years ago, an average household is now spending more than $1,000 a month extra than they did 3 years ago for goods and services. So don't believe that story that they tell you how inflation is only 3, 4, or 5%. And in some of the global weather news, I thought this was really interesting. Temperatures were broken in China, not for being too warm, but for being too cold. A 64-year-old record in the far western region of China hit a new record of cold of negative 63.4 degrees Fahrenheit. That's about negative 52 degrees Celsius. And several other parts of China were under a freeze warning. Blizzards and icy rain caused damage to roads and trains. So I just thought that was really interesting because, when I was a kid, everybody was warning about global warming, and it kind of seems like there's not a whole lot of warming happening. European markets, the overseas market news, Russia and Italy were the biggest winners on the negative and positive side, but overall the markets were mixed there. In Latin America, those markets were mixed. The Merval was the biggest winner. Milei, which is the Trump, let's say, of Argentina, libertarian, first libertarian ever elected in the world, recently met Donald Trump in one of the meetings, the political meetings that they have. It's pretty cool to see the pictures. Middle East and Africa, Nigeria was the biggest loser there, even though most of the markets were positive. And then in the far, far east, we have Shanghai and China being the biggest winner there, even though the overall markets were mixed. Bitcoin and crypto, not a whole lot of news in the crypto space other than the fact that Bitcoin just kind of keep creeping up and creeping up. It's lower for the week, however. It went down by over 1% to 51,108. And in commodities, EV vehicles, electric vehicles, may not stop at guardrail barriers due to the fact that they're so heavy. It was a study that was done, and due to the fact that a lot of these cars weigh 2 or 3 times the amount normal cars, what the normal barriers were designed to stop, they're actually saying that there might be a situation with these barriers now that they might not stop these electric vehicles. So keep that in mind. Mexico's outgoing president is taking steps to try to save the most indebted company in the world, Pemex, which is the state-owned oil company in Mexico. They owe $106 billion in debt. And they're trying to continue to keep it alive with tax cuts in the tune of $6 billion. But they're probably going to have more problems sooner than later, due to the fact that it's just going to be pretty hard to service that debt. Oil prices are lower on Friday after the U.S. policymakers said that they're probably not going to lower rates as fast as everybody thought. U.S. crude was down over 3% to 76.49, while Brent, which is the international crude, went down over 2.20% to 81.62. And central bank buyers over the decade obviously have continued to buy gold, but something interesting has happened over the last 2 or 3 years where the global buying of gold in the entire world, the central banks now have picked up their buying, and they're about 25 to 30% of the whole market. One of the things I think is really interesting, what I always tell you is pay attention to what people do, not what they say. Now, central banks have a reserve. A lot of times they keep money from other countries, but they also keep gold because of, thousands of years ago, for hundreds of years, money was actually gold and silver. It was actually metals, even down to the Roman times, right? And so it's pretty interesting to me that the central banks are starting to pick up their buying spree, and kind of begs the question, why are they buying so much now? Could we be walking into a financial reset of some kind? Gold is up 1.09% to $2,036.30, while silver is down over 2% to $23.01. This has to do with the increase in the dollar due to the fact that the central bank said that they're going to maintain the interest rates higher. That creates a higher demand for people to come in for the demand of the dollar. The value of the dollar goes up, and then obviously the other commodities, which is most commodities in the world that are listed in dollars, go down because they have an inverse effect with the dollar. Financial and banking news. Putin gave the approval for HSBC to sell their Russian-owned unit to a bank called Expo Bank. If you guys didn't know, after the sanctions, a lot of companies, since they were sanctioned by the West, decided to get out of the Russian market. And the Russian lawmakers basically said that in a lot of cases, especially banks, they need specific approval from Putin himself. In addition to that, they're requiring a 50% discount on the assets. Capital One Financial is acquiring Discover Financial Service. If you guys don't know what Discover is, it's like Visa and MasterCard. It's a credit card processing company. They're buying it in a $35 billion all-stock deal, a 26% premium on Discover's stock price, and the deal is set to close in 2024-25, creating another financial behemoth. God forbid, all these institutions are too big to fail, and another 2008 and 2009 happens. Global debt levels hit a record high of $313 trillion in 2023, duplicating the GDP to debt ratios for a lot of countries. The ones that are in the biggest trouble, however, are India, Argentina, China, Russia, Malaysia, and South Africa. Now, if you remember when we talked about the BRICS countries, which was the economic bloc that's trying to create a financial system parallel to that of the U.S., which everybody uses right now, India, China, Russia, South Africa, 4 of the 6 countries that are on the list, 4 of the 5 BRICS, B-R-I-C-S, 5. So 4 of the 5 are literally starting to have trouble with debt. So it kind of begs the question if these BRIC countries are actually going to be able to overtake the U.S.-led financial system due to the fact that they might have some economic problems of their own in the coming years due to the debt. Applications for U.S. mortgages dropped over 10% the prior week after rates increased back above 7%. And Malay's Argentina's economic ministry ran a budget surplus of $620 million after he got rid of ministers and all kind of red tape and bureaucracy. First time the country has a surplus since August 2012. If you didn't know, Argentina was actually the richest country in the world in 1900. Then they started voting for the left, the Peronist policies, basically communism, and now they're one of the poorest countries in the world. Political news, France. There's a new law that was passed that any criticism of the thing in your arm, specifically, the mRNA technology, can get you up to 3 years of imprisonment and a 45,000 euro fine. Meanwhile, the American Red Cross is now asking blood donors if they received the thing in your arm from the pandemic. And if you have received it, you may not be eligible. They want you to call to see if you're still eligible. Now, I thought it was safe and effective. Ursula von der Leyen, which is the president of the European Union Commission, is confirmed the intention to lead for another 5 years. Remember that these people are not voted in or voted for by any populace. They're literally just selected by other politicians. And Sylvester Stallone is the latest to leave California for Florida. The exodus in California continues. Who would have thought that people didn't like walking around with drug drugs on the street and needles and feces from from people all over the streets. Now, one of the interesting things about California is 180,000, listen to this carefully, 180,000 of the top earning Californians pay 70% of the state's general fund revenue, which means that 25 to 50% of these people have left, which means that California has to fill a hole, and it's most likely going to be with taxes, because that's how any Democrat-Republic actually does it, right? California is the most left-leaning state in the country, and they're probably going to put more taxes and fees and all kinds of things. So if you live in California, just like you live in New York, probably a good time to get out. Jeff Bezos have saved over $600 million moving to Miami. If you guys, he moved from Washington, which is a similar state to California. No state income tax in Florida, and Jeff Bezos just sold, or is in process of selling, about $8 billion in stock. Trump launched a golden pair of original sneakers going for $400. They sold out in minutes. Now they're selling for thousands of dollars online. There was a pair on eBay that was selling for $7,500. A swing state of Ohio passed a constitutional carry, which basically means that you don't need a permit to have a gun, right? You could just, you can get it without a permit. And 6 of Ohio's 8 largest cities experienced a drop in gun crime after they removed the concealed weapons permit, which was actually interesting. And another thing that's interesting is JP Morgan and BlackRock quietly have dropped out of the UN Climate Alliance, which is actually interesting as well. So it looks like all these bureaucratic policies are starting to fall one by one. Economic news, the Bundesbank, which is Germany's central bank, stated that the economy in Germany, which is now the 3rd largest in the world, is likely in a recession now. External demand is weak and consumers remain cautious, while borrowing costs continue to be high because of the interest rates. And poverty levels in Argentina hit 57% in January, the highest level in the last 20 years. So we'll see if the libertarian Milei, the first libertarian candidate to be voted into office anywhere in the world, can turn that around. Corporate news, Moderna surged over 13% after they beat fourth quarter revenue expectations. The company BYD, which is the largest electrical vehicle maker in the world out of China, they are starting to slash their costs as well. Their new car is 20% cheaper at just $11,000 for one of their new models that are coming out. And EU is fining Apple about 500 million euros over alleged breaches of EU competition law. And that is going to be fined or stated to them. I don't know how you say that in English. They're gonna fine them essentially. They're gonna put it on them next month. Technology, Volvo is saying that the emissions from electric vehicles are 70% higher in electric cars compared to gas models, and it takes 9 years of driving in an electric vehicle to become cleaner than gas. So putting all the dots here, remember that a battery in an electric vehicle lasts about 10 years, and to replace one, it costs about $25,000 to $50,000, tens of thousands of dollars. So you buy the electric car because you think you're saving the environment. Then you're really only saving the environment after 9 years, and then only a year later you have to buy another battery, which you literally go back to zero. Not to mention the absolute devastation that these mining companies leave in the land to be able to get the lithium and the copper and all the stuff that you need for those batteries. But, it's just common sense. Who am I to talk about common sense? Neuralink invested, they just came out with their first human trial that was successful. Elon Musk said that the progress was good and the patients seemed to made a full recovery with no ill effects that they were aware of. The initial goal is to be able to control a computer cursor or a keyboard using their thoughts. So Neuralink is another one of Elon Musk's inventions that is continuing to show fruits. And a massive AT&T cell phone blockage or blackout affected 1.7 million customers. Disrupted emergency services as well. Initially, they were saying that it was a solar storm, but now they're admitting that it was some changes that they were making to their network. No trade news or investment news. In international news, massive farmer protests, which aren't on the mainstream news, are now expanding to Spain and Greece. And I haven't talked about the wars in Ukraine and Israel for quite some time, but those are continuing to expand, with Russia taking another city and Israel bombarding the city of Rafah in Gaza, in the south of Gaza, on Wednesday. Interesting facts, the Basque region in Spain, they just unearthed a bronze sculpture that looks like a hand that's about 2,100 years old. And one of the things that's fascinating about the Basque region is that most languages have an origin. For example, Portuguese, Spanish, English, French, they're all Latin languages, so they're traced back to the Roman times. Russian, Ukrainian, there's Slavic languages, German. So everything has an origin, whereas the Basque language in Europe, and this is northern Spain on the border between Spain and France, it doesn't have an origin, so they actually don't know where it came from. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe, and remember, the preppers were right.